Welcome to ASEAN 1.
And this is Towards 2015, the program to broaden your business perspective in a large market with over 600 million consumers, which is the ASEAN market.
Well, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohammad is actually considered as an ASEAN statesman and a historically noted leader of Malaysia, and he who had gained trust from the Malay people from his longest reign of premiership for 4 consecutive terms from 1981 to 2003. Furthermore, Mahathir Mohammad actually planted the seeds of economic integration. His economic caucus for the ASEAN region actually had grown into ASEAN Economic Community 2015.
In Asia, there are not very many statesmen who can be fully recognized as a regional leader like Mahathir Mohammad, the 4th Prime Minister of Malaysia, who held the post for 22 years from 1981 to 2003. Not only was he the world's longest-serving elected leader, he also left behind a legacy as the voice of Asia after his retirement. There are several reasons to believe that he was the true voice for the region. He was a true believer that the third world countries should stick together in order to thrive in the global economy against the West. Comparatively, Singapore is more economically advanced. Indonesia is bigger in country size, and Thailand has more advantage for its strategic location. But Malaysia during Mahathir's tenure as Prime Minister experienced rapid modernization and economic growth through its bold infrastructure policies. His pragmatic policies won him much popularity and helped transform Malaysia into an Asian economic tiger. Known to the world as prominent Muslim figure that stood up to the West, the former Malaysian leader envisioned the Asian way. With the end of the Cold War and the spread of regionalism, the idea of regional cooperation and integration in East in the 1990s, he initiated the East Asia Economic Group, or EAEG. During his opening remark at the ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting in Kuala Lumpur in October 1991, Mahathir explained that his idea on the EAEG was to enhance economic influence and bargaining power of countries in East Asia. He elaborated that if ASEAN is to have a bigger say in trade negotiation internationally, then it must work together with East Asian countries. Unless we have EAEG, ASEAN and every country in the region will be at the mercy of the trade blocs of Europe and America. There will be so many conditionalities and linkages with non-trade issues that the growth of ASEAN countries will be retarded. We will all remain developing countries forever. However, the idea was never realized and eventually died out by the end of the 1990s, as for the lack of consultations with other ASEAN member countries. It was difficult to convince countries involved to see the value and benefit of the EAEG, and some countries were highly skeptical of Malaysia's agenda. Seen as an anti-Western grouping, the U.S. formed APEC with Australia being the front-runner in 1993, effectively killing the EAEG with worries that Asia would strengthen its economic muscle. Though the EAEG has never been realized, it gave birth to the idea of setting up regional grouping in East Asia, consisting of Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia, which became a reality in the few years after the idea had been proposed. The model of EAEG was later replaced by AFTA, where it was reignited by then Thai Prime Minister Anand Panjarashun. With the Asian financial crisis of 1997 to 1998, Malaysia was the only country in Asia to refuse to concede to the IMF. Mahathir implemented the capital control and pegged the Malaysian ringgit to the US dollar with a fixed rate at 3.8 ringgit per dollar. This move was in reverse to all of its neighboring countries like Thailand, Indonesia, and Singapore. It initially drew world condemnation, where international financier George Soros called Mahathir a recipe for disaster and is a menace to his own country. Only years later, experts accepted that Mahathir's handling of the crisis was the better way because there were less economic and financial damage when compared to the consequences faced by other ASEAN countries that adopted the IMF's solution. Although Mahathir has retired, he is still active and undeniably an ASEAN statesman, where his legacy is still practical today.
And now Mahathir Mohammad has given us the honor of an exclusive interview towards 2015, and he comments on ASEAN member states' preparedness and readiness for the integration in 2015.
In the ASEAN community, well, I think it can do better. It is not bad. We are still meeting, we are still cohesive, but I think in terms of people-to-people relation, it's still not as good as it should be. People don't travel to each other's country. In fact, instead they travel to other parts of the world.
So, but if you see that last week the ASEAN Regional Forum, it's not really a success since there was no joint Communique statement coming out. So what do you think about this rife? I mean, among the ASEAN nations, probably between Cambodia and the Philippines, they don't get along well with China?
Well, of course, we have different views about certain things. Sometimes we differ and differ a lot. And when that happens, of course, it's difficult to reach agreement on a common communique. But that does not mean that ASEAN is breaking up or anything like that. I think behind the scenes, they will still try to reach some agreement.
Another worrisome factor is right now the European debt crisis that might pull the world economy down the drain and into deep recession along with it. So Dr. Mahathir Mohammad actually suggested with his critical insights on the issue and also a roadmap to recovery and a proper remedy for long as well.
You once said Europe is poor, so should live within its means. But it means that ASEAN can survive on our own? Or do we still have to depend on them? Or is there any relation between us economically?
Actually, Europe has been poor over a long time because they were not doing any business, no trade. They don't produce any goods to sell or services to provide, but they live with very high wages, high salaries, and they have a good life. But it is not through doing business, it's through all kinds of playing around with money. And actually they cannot afford to pay all those high wages and have long holidays, free medical treatment and all that. They cannot afford, at least at that level. Now, of course, when they find that the economy is down, they cannot recover. They can only recover if they live for some time as poor people and work very hard and be productive and compete in the markets of the world. But they are not prepared to do that. They still demand high pay, and if they do that, they are not going to recover.